Hey guys, it's Alex, and as always, we're here to chat about a little bit of my knowledge about a lot of different topics. Today's topic is talking about teaching. So, for those of you that do not know, I am just ending actually my fourth full year as a full time DCPS teacher in the District of Columbia Public Schools. I look rough. All right, so while this video is happening, I'm actually probably going to brush my beard. Just because I don't like the way that it looks. Oh no. Well, that stinks. I think I left it in my other bag. Oh well, I'll have to deal with it. Oh well, whatever. I'll get a haircut tomorrow. So, where was I? Teaching. Yes, I've been teaching in DC for full time for about 4 years. If I include other things I've done while teaching in DC, it'd be 5 years. And there are. I have learned some very, very valuable information and valuable tools to take with me as a teacher and as a human being, continuing to operate and move throughout life. Teaching in the 21st century, teaching in 2017, is a lot different than education and teaching 20, 30, 40 years ago even. So there's this cartoon of this boy and his parent at a parent-teacher conference, and it's two panels. And so the first panel shows the boy with his mother and the teacher and the parent are looking at the child asking, "What did you do?" While on the other side, it's the parent and the child looking at the teacher, like, "What did you do?" And I find that really interesting, and it's a real commentary on society nowadays because one of the major issues is that there's a lack of respect for the profession of a teacher. Teachers go to school to learn how to teach, and they continue to hone and work on their craft. As required, we have to do professional development, not just throughout the course of the school year, but even over the summer and throughout our free time and our downtime to continue enriching ourselves, to keep up certification and whatnot. And so it's become something that's really necessary, development and continuous growth. And there's not a respect for the people that actually work to study to get these degrees and to get these accolades, and there's not really respect for the profession of teaching anymore. A lot of the issues that teachers have, the reality is the majority of it has less to do with the students. Depending on the school system, the school environment, you have a different set of challenges for a different set of students. The students who I serve now are very different in their challenges that they bring to the table than the students that I had previously to this current school. And so when you go to a new school, you have to learn as a teacher, you have to learn how to engage and how to interact with the students and how to meaningfully build those relationships. But the reality is the students and the issues that students come with are the least of the concerns that teachers have as professionals in a workspace. Bringing back and referencing that cartoon that I talked to you about, one of the major issues that a lot of teachers have is that the teacher is always to blame. That at the end of the day, the buck stops with the teacher. If we were in the business world and the teacher was a project manager and they were the lead person, the go-to person, yeah, that would be the sense where the buck stops with the teacher. But the reality is a good majority of teachers do what they're supposed to do and work to go above and beyond what they're even asked to or supposed to do. And not everything is the teacher's fault. I mean, the reality is just not everything is the teacher's fault. A teacher can provide consequences, for example, but if the administration that's there and the parents that are involved don't follow through with the consequence that the teacher in the classroom has outlined, then it diminishes the teacher's power, and the teacher has has a little bit less control in the situation than the student does. The student then feels empowered to continue to do an action that the teacher felt warranted a disciplinary action. And so a lot of the time, whether it comes to behavior or to grades, the teacher ends up being the one to blame. I'll give a personal And I'll give a personal example about each of these things that I'll chit chat about. There was one instance where, um, and this was an instance where I had the support of administration, but there was one instance where a parent continued to email me back and forth regarding her child's needs in my classroom. And the way that I run my class as a teacher is I teach my classes and I set my classroom environment up in a way that it is generally inclusive, and to the point where students that need to excel and be pushed further have that opportunity to and that space to, while the students that need to be helped up a little bit more have that opportunity and space to in a classroom. Sometimes my classes max at 32 this year for a sixth grade class. And so it's a challenging, piece, but it's something that I work hard to make sure that I do. And this particular parent felt that her daughter was not getting the supports that she needed. And at every turn, the conversation was, you didn't do something. You didn't do something, talking to me, referencing to me. You didn't grade this. You didn't ask her to turn this in. And for every accusation, there was a valid response or a valid reason. Several of the things that she claimed to have turned in were not turned in. This particular parent even said I didn't grade a particular homework assignment and said, I can prove it to you. And then let me give you the entire story, right? Okay, so essentially what she was saying was that I didn't grade or take an assignment that should have been taken and grade that. She told me this maybe in like a third email. And then I responded, well, if you have it, just send it with her and blah, 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 blah. She responded, well, I wish you would have told me that sooner because I threw out the letter, or I threw it out with the mail and with the trash, and the trash man already picked it up, blah, 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 blah. Couple of threads later, mind you, this is a long thread, right? So a couple of threads later, she goes back into saying, oh, I found it. I thought the trash man took it. Okay, she says, I found it. She uncrumpled this piece of paper and took a photo of it and sent it to me via email. And I said, I can't really make this out because I can't really see anything in the photo. Would you mind bringing it in? She had a problem bringing in a piece of paper. Now, if someone's arguing with me about something my child did do in school and saying that they didn't do it, personally, I would Lysol the crap out of that, put it in a plastic bag, and bring it and throw it on the desk and be like, here it is. That wasn't the exact response I received. It was more like, I'm not going to bring it because I don't want it. It's too dirty and germy, blah, 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 blah. Mind you, the piece of paper looked like a regular white piece of paper just crumpled up and reopened again. Right? We've gotten, and that's actually not really that much of a more dramatic story. I mean, literally, many of the issues and stories that you hear about parents or administrators or students blaming the teacher pretty much sound just about as fanciful as that, if not more. Generally speaking, nowadays, teachers are the ones that are to blame. The reality is, teachers understand the responsibility that's on us, right? We understand the responsibility and we take it seriously, but it's impossible for us to be responsible for everything. It's impossible for us to catch everything. It's impossible for us to manage every little thing. Throughout the course of this year, I've seen 400 students in my class. It's going to be virtually impossible for me to A, remember their names, B, remember the progression of each particular student after they've left my class, and C, while I'm managing classes of 32 kids, and I only have them for 9 weeks in between field trips and assessments and all this other stuff, have to really monitor and manage every single thing. At a certain point, especially in middle school, secondary school, there needs to be some student responsibility and some student efficacy. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, it's placed back on the teacher. We as educators often do get asked our opinion about specific topics or specific things that could or should work in the school system. But there's another side to that that's kind of unfortunate. Teachers give input consistently about logical decisions that would affect the school day. When it comes to building the schedule, when it comes to how classes should be set up and arranged, there's a lot of input that, and rightfully so, that classroom teachers would have. And the unfortunate reality is that in many schools and in many school districts, teachers' input is not valued. That depends also on the administration in the building. That also depends on the entire structure of the school system at large. What I will say is that having taught at a couple of different schools in the district, I have not found that generally meaningful input is taken seriously from administrators. Seriously to the point where it's actually put into practice consistently. And I think that kind of ties in to the next portion, which kind of talks about administrators. You know, I've experienced several different kinds of administrators, but one thing that I have noticed with many administrators, and not just ones that I've worked with specifically, but ones whom I've spoken with colleagues about and have interacted with, is that they generally have a way that they believe education should look. And in that vein, you get one of two administrators. Sorry, I don't know why that did that. Oh. And in that vein, you get one of two administrators. You either get the administrators who see the value in what you're saying and do their best to work with you to make sure that that happens in a meaningful way for the students, or you have the administrators who are blinded by their own ego. And when you run into administrators that are blinded by their own ego, it's very difficult for them to meaningfully take in any suggestions or any comments about their leadership style or anything that they have pushed forward that isn't working so well. I've come across several different administrators whose ego was large enough that they felt attacked and or threatened on some level by certain people in the building. Okay, so I was trying to be really PC about this, but I'm kind of not going to. So let's check. Unfortunately, I've come across a lot of administrators who don't acknowledge the fact that although they might have amassed a certain amount of years and experience, they don't know everything. People are constantly changing. Human beings are constantly changing. The way that life and social life interacts are constantly changing. Therefore, that does mean that students are going to change. And the way that you engage with and the way that you interact with students is going to change. And the way that you have to go about managing them and disciplining them is going to change and has to grow. And unfortunately, many administrators whom I've come in contact with don't want to engage in that. When they've reached a certain level in their life and a certain stature and a certain mindset about their profession and their work, they get very much so in their feelings. I'll give personal examples again. Twice I have had to engage with administrators with whom I did not see eye to eye with on a pedagogical level. There were things that musically, as a musician, as a music teacher, I knew and felt with research-backed evidence to support it, felt that the way that the school or schools were going pedagogically, musically speaking, was not the direction that was on par with what music education should look like. And it was very clear and evident that in each of those administrators' minds, they had an idea of what it should look like. And if your idea looked anything different than theirs, it was unfortunately wrong. When the real truth is their desires have nothing to do with what music education actually is and what it actually looks like. And again, I can only speak from a music teacher standpoint, but having shared conversations with other colleagues, it's very evident that generally administrators want it to look a certain way, but don't really know what it takes to get that particular subject area or that particular program off the ground to work in that particular way. Um, and and in that same vein, they stop paying attention to valid aspects of what teachers are actually saying and asking for, which causes consistent frustration. Imagine, if you will, you coming to work every day, having to deal with 180 kids per day in 5 different periods, plan lessons, differentiate lessons, make sure that everyone is getting what they need. Forget your own life, right? You're just working professionally, and you see these errors and these things that can be adjusted, and you bring them up to your school leader. And your leader, instead of engaging you in the discussion about, okay, well, why is this the best choice? Why is this a better choice for this particular school? Show me your research. Let's have a discussion. This is why I think that. Instead of engaging in a discussion like that, it's more of a, okay, I hear you. This is what we're going to do. Instead of a leader, it's a more of a managerial boss situation. And when you're in a school where everyone is an educator, when you're in a school building where all of the adults there are an educator, at some point you have to take a step back and say, well, what can I learn from this? And a lot of administrators that I've come in contact with, unfortunately, don't think about what more can I learn. I've had some great administrators. I've had some not so great administrators. I've had some rude administrators. I've had some spiteful administrators. I have seen many different personality types hold those positions. I think the key thing is that as a teacher, engaging with that, it becomes very challenging and very difficult when you know what you know, and you're going up against someone who doesn't know and refuses to listen. And that kind of brings me into the next arena of education being very political. I'm going to hit this in a couple of different ways. Well, the first way is pedigree and age. I attended Howard University. I started teaching full-time in public school at the age of 22. Yeah, 22. I had to think about that. I started teaching at the age of 22. And going into teaching, I knew what I knew. And I knew that there was a whole lot of stuff I didn't know. If I think about, what I know about teaching from 0 to 100%, I knew that going into teaching, I was confident with about 5% of what teaching actually was. Like, confident. I knew and I had a grasp and an understanding, I'll say, of about 15 to 20%. But I was solid and comfortable with a good 5% going into my first year of teaching. After my first year of teaching, my comfort level and solidification in what I knew was solidified in that 15%. After about 2-3 years of teaching fully, I feel like I have about 40% of what teaching for me could potentially be at 100%. I have about 40% of that. And so ending this year, I feel like I'm really hitting that halfway, that 50% mark. Like, I know what teaching looks like at 50% for me, like, and not having everything together, but having enough together with a solid foundation. And I try to be very, very mindful of what I do know and what I don't know. But what I do know is that when you're confident in what you do know, and when you fall on the younger end of the educator spectrum, it is expected more of you that it is expected that you are more, when you fall on the younger end of the spectrum, it is expected that you lie more in subordination to those that are older and your administrators, as opposed to discussing and having discussions like adults. At times, I have felt that I have been spoken to in a particular way because I was a younger teacher. But me being young doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm talking about. There are things I don't know. I always say that. There are plenty of things I do not know. But I know a lot about a little bit. I know a lot about what I'm talking about. And if I present an argument, I come to the argument with an understanding. A lot of young teachers have to rail against that, and they're either in one of two categories, very much so. They're the passive ones that will keep their head down and will work and will stay there and do what they're asked to do, despite that the fact that they may disagree. They'll keep working and they'll pursue it. And then there are those like myself who know how to bridle their tongue in important moments and necessary moments, but are not afraid to make it known what they know and what they think and what they bring to the table. I've always been taught to voice my opinion, to speak my mind, and to always speak truth to power, right? I've always been taught that if you know something and if you have evidence of something and you can articulate it in a meaningful way, then it should be shared. People don't like to hear that. And it's interesting that educators don't like to hear that because they feel on some level they're being threatened or they're being challenged. And I think that goes back to the administrator ego that I've talked about and that I've seen, that kind of really gets in the way of building meaningful and lasting relationships with students from a teacher standpoint. Because if I can't engage with my administrator on a particular level or a particular way, how can I then expect them to help me engage with the student? That as my administrator, they should be able to kind of help facilitate that. If they can't even facilitate a professional conversation with me because they don't respect my view or think that it's worthy of having a discussion about. Same in this political vein, that there's just so much. I don't know what that was. Same in this political vein, though. There's just so much of teaching that is political. There's so much of having. I'm gonna spill a little tea here for DC. Like, you can try to transfer schools and still stay in the District of Columbia, but depending on the relationship or lack thereof you have with your current principal, they might stop you from going to another school that you want to go to. It's very centered on, it's very political, and it's very unnecessary, because education is one of those professions in where the goal and the purpose is so much greater that the need for pettiness is kind of unfounded. And that same notion even goes into like teacher evaluations. For those of you that aren't familiar with evaluation systems that are different around the country, DCPS has something that's called Impact. And that's a whole separate discussion, whole separate argument, whole separate topic to have. But essentially what it is supposed to do is evaluate the teacher's impact on the student's learning. And is the teacher cultivating a classroom where students can actually excel and learn at a higher rate? Now, my issues with impact notwithstanding, I have, been rated an effective teacher for all the 3 years, well, for 3 of the 4 years at which I've been teaching, with the exception of my first year where I was in the developing range, but like the high developing range. Again, other issues I have with the system itself, but I've been rated as an effective teacher. And although I personally don't need the validation of the particular system, what it does for me is that it confirms what I've been feeling and what I've been thinking, and that if I can be rated effective with this very subjective system of evaluation, then I really am doing my job. I really am being an effective teacher. Then I really am being an effective teacher. And when they come into my classroom, when people came to evaluate my classroom, they saw what I do on a regular basis. I don't put on a dog and pony show. I don't call on specific students to get them to show. I even call on purposely the students that don't necessarily understand, so they can see how I respond to student understanding. And sometimes that's, on point. Sometimes I know how to, hit it right on the bat, right on the head, hit the nail on the head. Why are my metaphors mixed up today? Sometimes I'm able to hit the nail right on the head. Sometimes, not so much. But I'm never afraid to just continue to be myself in front of the classroom, in front of an observer. And if I can be rated effective with the subjective system, then I know I'm doing my job. But the systems and the evaluation systems themselves are, can be and have been used as tools of punishment or retribution from administrators or from the larger body of DCPS to teachers. Sorry, not sorry, but the tea being spilled. Be a more effective parent engaged with my student's school. I'm going to put out a 5 things that you as a parent can do video a little bit later. And so that's going to be, my 5 suggestions of what I've experienced and what I've seen that I think parents could really take on themselves and really do to really help bridge these particular gaps that we see in education between teachers and families, as well as the entire school body and the students' families whom we serve. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you like it, go ahead and click that little thumbs up so we can get some more likes on this page. Also, go ahead and see that little red subscribe button down there. Yeah, go ahead and click that, or maybe it's on this side. I actually don't know. Either way, no, it'll be right here. Yeah. And you can subscribe to this particular YouTube channel where we'll be chatting about a lot of different topics. You can also follow this page. And that is my artist page. Yes, I am a classical singer. I do have stuff going on, gigs happening, music posted, and you can always see what's on there through my artist page. Well, that's my video for today. Thanks for joining and chatting. And thanks for watching Alex Chats, where I chat a little bit about a lot of different topics. All right, have a great one.